Welcome back to another episode of True Crime Untold Cases. I'm your host, Harper Quinn. It was meant to be a simple Christmas shopping trip in Fort Worth, Texas. 3 girls, a newlywed, her best friend, and their young neighbor, headed to Seminary South Shopping Center on a bright December morning in 1974. Their car was found in the parking lot, presents wrapped and waiting inside. But Rachel Trlica, Lisa Wilson, and Julie Moseley were gone. A mysterious letter, postmarked the next day, only deepened the mystery. Nearly 50 years later, their disappearance remains one of Texas's most baffling cold cases. Tonight, we'll dive into the story of the Fort Worth missing trio and the questions that still haunt their families to this day. The morning of December 23, 1974, dawned crisp and clear in Fort Worth, Texas. The Seminary South Shopping Center was bustling with last-minute Christmas shoppers, and among them were 3 girls who would soon become the focus of one of Texas's most enduring mysteries. 17-year-old Mary Rachel Trlica, 14-year-old Lisa Renee Wilson, and 9-year-old Julie Ann Moseley had set out early that morning to finish their holiday shopping, planning to be home by noon. Mary Rachel, who went by Rachel, had been married for 6 months to Tommy Trlica. She was responsible and level-headed, known for being a good influence on her younger companions. Lisa Wilson was Rachel's best friend and neighbor, while Julie Moseley was Lisa's 9-year-old neighbor who had begged to come along on their shopping trip. Julie's mother had initially hesitated, but eventually agreed, knowing that Rachel was trustworthy and mature for her age. The girls were last seen at the Seminary South Shopping Center around 11:30 a.m., driving Rachel's 1972 Oldsmobile 98. Witnesses would later report seeing them carrying Christmas packages and appearing to be in good spirits. They had visited several stores, including an Army-Navy store where Rachel planned to pick up a gift for her husband. When noon came and went without the girls returning home, their families weren't immediately alarmed. It was the holiday season after all, and shopping often took longer than expected. But as afternoon turned to evening, concern began to grow. The girls had missed several deadlines they'd set for their return, and none of them had called home. Something completely out of character, especially for Rachel. By nightfall, the families were frantically searching the shopping center and surrounding areas. Rachel's Oldsmobile was found in the center's parking lot, locked, with Christmas packages visible inside through the windows. The presents were wrapped and appeared to have been carefully placed in the car, suggesting the girls had returned to the vehicle at some point during their shopping trip. The Fort Worth Police Department initially treated the case as a possible runaway situation, despite the family's insistence that something was terribly wrong. Rachel was newly married and happy, Lisa was looking forward to upcoming school activities, and Julie was too young to have orchestrated any kind of departure. Moreover, none of the girls had taken any clothes or personal belongings with them. The investigation took a bizarre turn the very next day, Christmas Eve, when a letter arrived at the home of Rachel's husband, Tommy Trlica. The letter was supposedly written by Rachel and postmarked from Throckmorton, Texas, about 120 miles away. The contents of the letter would become one of the most debated pieces of evidence in the case. "I know I'm going to catch it, but we just had to get away. We're going to Houston. See you in about a week. The car is in Sears' upper lot. Love, Rachel." The letter immediately raised red flags with both the families and investigators. The handwriting was questionable. While it bore some similarities to Rachel's, there were notable differences. The signature particularly troubled Rachel's family. She always signed her name Rachel, but in this letter it appeared as Ray, something she never did. Furthermore, the letter had been addressed to Thomas, while Rachel invariably called her husband Tommy. The investigation revealed more troubling details about the letter. The envelope had been addressed with a different pen than the letter itself, and forensic analysis suggested the handwriting might have been disguised. Perhaps most significantly, Rachel's brother Rusty noticed that the letter appeared to have been written with pressure against a car dashboard. There were impressions consistent with this theory visible on the paper. As the days turned into weeks, the search intensified. The Fort Worth Police Department, initially criticized for their slow response, began conducting extensive interviews and following up on leads. They discovered that several witnesses had seen the girls at the shopping center, but accounts varied about their movements and whether they appeared to be alone or in the company of others. One of the most intriguing leads came from a security guard who reported seeing the 3 girls in the company of a man, or possibly multiple men, near the Army-Navy store. However, this sighting couldn't be definitively confirmed, and like many other leads in the case, it led nowhere conclusive. The families, frustrated with the official investigation, began conducting their own searches and following up on tips themselves. They distributed flyers, contacted media outlets, and hired private investigators. Rachel's husband Tommy and her brother Rusty were particularly active in pursuing leads, often driving hundreds of miles to check out reported sightings. The disappearance began to take a toll on the Fort Worth community. The Seminary South Shopping Center, once a popular destination for families, saw a significant decline in visitors. Parents became more protective of their children, and the case served as a stark reminder that even seemingly safe, everyday activities could end in tragedy. As investigators dug deeper into the background of the case, they found no obvious red flags or warning signs. Rachel and Tommy's marriage, while young, appeared to be stable and happy. Lisa had been excited about an upcoming school dance and had been shopping for an outfit. Julie had left her favorite doll at home and had been saving her allowance to buy Christmas presents for her family. The investigation also revealed that the girls had made several planned stops that morning before reaching Seminary South. They had visited the Seminary South Sears store, and receipts showed purchases at other locations in the shopping center. Everything appeared normal until they simply vanished. Investigators explored various theories. Could it have been a random abduction? A planned kidnapping? Had the girls actually run away, despite all evidence to the contrary? Each theory had its problems, and none fully explained the circumstances of their disappearance or the mysterious letter. The letter continued to be a central focus of the investigation. Handwriting experts were brought in to analyze it, but their conclusions were inconclusive. Some believed Rachel had written it under duress, while others were convinced it was a forgery. The location of its posting, Throckmorton, was thoroughly investigated, but no concrete evidence of the girl's presence there was ever found. The case took another turn when investigators learned that Rachel's husband Tommy had received a strange phone call shortly after the disappearance. The caller, never identified, allegedly said only, "Rachel is fine," before hanging up. The call couldn't be traced, and its significance remains unclear to this day. As 1974 drew to a close, the families of Rachel, Lisa, and Julie faced the heartbreaking reality that their loved ones might never return. The new year brought more searches, more leads, and more disappointments. The case began to attract attention from across the country, with similar cases being examined for possible connections, but no solid links were ever established. The investigation would continue to evolve over the coming months and years, with new theories emerging and old ones being revisited. But as the winter of 1974 settled over Fort Worth, 3 families were left with nothing but questions about what had happened to their loved ones on what should have been a routine Christmas shopping trip. The investigation moved into 1975 with renewed intensity as national media began to take notice of the case. The disappearance of 3 girls in broad daylight from a busy shopping center challenged the notion of safety in suburban America, and similarities to other missing persons cases across the country began to emerge. One of the most significant developments came when investigators discovered that a similar incident had occurred at the same shopping center just months before the trio's disappearance. A young woman reported being approached by two men who attempted to lure her to their car. She had managed to escape, but the incident was never properly investigated at the time. Whether there was a connection to the missing girls remains unknown, but it suggested that Seminary South might have been targeted by predators. The families continued their own relentless investigation, often following leads that law enforcement had dismissed. Rachel Trlica, Rachel's brother, became particularly invested in the case, spending countless hours retracing the girls' steps and interviewing potential witnesses. His dedication would span decades, and he would later become one of the most knowledgeable sources about the case. In March 1975, another letter surfaced, this one addressed to Rachel's parents. Like the first letter, its authenticity was questioned, but it contained details that suggested the writer had intimate knowledge of the case. The letter claimed the girls were safe but unable to return home. Handwriting analysis was inconclusive, and the letter's origin couldn't be traced, adding another layer of mystery to the already complex case. The investigation also revealed an interesting detail about the morning of the disappearance. A clerk at a record store in Seminary South recalled seeing the three girls talking to a security guard or someone dressed in a uniform similar to mall security. This sighting was never officially confirmed, and no security personnel admitted to the interaction, but it raised questions about whether someone might have used a position of authority to gain the girls' trust. By the summer of 1975, investigators had interviewed hundreds of people and followed up on countless leads. They'd traced the girls' movements through the shopping center with relative certainty until about 11:30 a.m., but after that, the trail went cold. Security cameras, which might have provided crucial evidence, were scarce in 1974, and the few that existed had already recycled their tapes by the time the investigation began in earnest. The case took another turn when a woman in Oklahoma claimed to have seen the three girls at a gas station several days after their disappearance. She described them in detail and said they were accompanied by two men in a pickup truck. The lead was investigated thoroughly, but like so many others, it led nowhere. However, it added to a growing pattern of sightings that suggested the girls might have been taken out of Texas. In late 1975, a private investigator hired by the families uncovered what seemed to be a promising lead. He found witnesses who claimed to have seen three girls matching the missing trio's descriptions being forced into a pickup truck several blocks from Seminary South on the day of their disappearance. The witnesses hadn't come forward earlier because they assumed what they'd seen was just a family argument. While this lead seemed to support the abduction theory, investigators couldn't find any physical evidence to corroborate the accounts. The case also drew attention from various psychics and self-proclaimed mediums who offered their services to the desperate families. While most of their leads proved fruitless, one psychic's vision led searchers to a remote area outside Fort Worth where they discovered items that might have belonged to the girls. However, forensic analysis proved inconclusive, and the items couldn't be definitively linked to Rachel, Lisa, or Julie. The investigation was further complicated by the emergence of various theories about organized crime involvement. Fort Worth in the 1970s had its share of criminal activity, and some investigators believed the girls might have accidentally witnessed something they weren't supposed to see. This theory gained some traction when investigators discovered that several known criminals had been in the shopping center that day, but no direct connections could ever be established. Tommy Trlica, Rachel's husband, remained under scrutiny throughout the investigation, as is common in missing persons cases involving married couples. However, he maintained his innocence and actively participated in the search efforts. His alibi for the day of the disappearance was solid, and investigators found no evidence suggesting his involvement. The family's lives were forever altered by the disappearance. Lisa's mother, Julie Wilson, became an advocate for missing children's cases and worked to improve how law enforcement handled such investigations. Julie's parents, Rayanne and Richard Moseley, never gave up hope of finding their daughter, but struggled with the guilt of having allowed her to go on the shopping trip. As the years passed, the case began to show the limitations of 1970s-era investigative techniques. Evidence that might have been crucial, such as DNA analysis, cell phone records, or comprehensive surveillance footage, simply didn't exist. The few physical pieces of evidence that were collected, including the mysterious letters, were repeatedly re-examined as forensic technology advanced, but no breakthrough emerged. The disappearance of the Fort Worth trio became a cautionary tale that parents in Texas and beyond would tell their children. It changed the way many people viewed public spaces and challenged the assumption that safety could be found in numbers. The case also highlighted the vulnerabilities in how missing persons cases were handled in the 1970s, leading to some reforms in law enforcement procedures. By the end of 1975, the active investigation had begun to slow, but the case was far from forgotten. New leads would continue to emerge, and each anniversary of the disappearance would bring renewed media attention and fresh appeals for information. The families would face decades of false hopes, disappointed expectations, and the crushing weight of uncertainty about the fate of their loved ones. The 1980s brought both new investigative techniques and fresh heartbreak to the families of Rachel, Lisa, and Julie. As age progression photos were developed, a relatively new technology at the time, the families faced the stark reality of how their loved ones might look as adults. These images were distributed nationwide, leading to a new wave of reported sightings, though none proved conclusive. In 1981, a significant lead emerged when a woman in Denver, Colorado, claimed to have encountered a woman who matched Rachel's age-progressed photo and knew specific details about Fort Worth. The woman appeared nervous and quickly left when questioned about her background. Local law enforcement investigated, but by the time they tracked down the location, the woman had vanished. The incident highlighted a frustrating pattern in the case, promising leads that evaporated before they could be fully investigated. The case took another turn in 1984 when an anonymous caller contacted the Fort Worth Police Department claiming to have information about the girl's fate. The caller, who never revealed their identity, suggested the disappearance was linked to a human trafficking operation that had been active in Texas during the 1970s. While investigators took the tip seriously and coordinated with federal authorities, they couldn't substantiate the claims. Rachel Trlica, Rachel's brother, continued his personal investigation throughout the 1980s and 1990s. In 1987, he received what he considered one of the most credible tips in the case's history. A former Seminary South employee came forward with information about seeing the girls leaving the shopping center in a dark-colored van. The witness had remained silent for years out of fear, but was finally compelled to speak. Unfortunately, too much time had passed to effectively follow up on the vehicle description or potential suspects. The 1990s brought new hope with the advent of DNA technology and improved database systems for missing persons. The families provided DNA samples that were entered into national databases, hoping for a match with unidentified remains or living persons. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children became involved, bringing new resources and attention to the case. In 1995, a cache of photographs was discovered in an abandoned storage unit in Houston that sparked interest in the case. Several photos showed young women who bore striking resemblances to Rachel and Lisa, but extensive analysis ultimately determined they weren't the missing girls. The incident demonstrated how the case continued to capture public attention and generate leads even decades later. The dawn of the internet age brought new opportunities and challenges to the investigation. Online forums and social media platforms allowed for wider distribution of information about the case, but also led to a proliferation of unfounded theories and false leads. The families had to navigate a complex landscape of well-meaning amateur sleuths, conspiracy theorists, and occasionally cruel hoaxers. In 2000, investigators reopened the case file to apply modern forensic techniques to the existing evidence. The mysterious letters, particularly the first one received by Tommy Trlica, underwent new analysis. Advanced handwriting analysis and paper dating techniques suggested the letter might have been written under duress, with experts noting subtle signs of stress in the handwriting that weren't detectable with 1970s technology. A breakthrough seemed possible in 2004, when a woman came forward claiming to have been in Seminary South on the day of the disappearance. She recalled seeing the 3 girls being approached by a man in a security guard uniform who appeared to be directing them toward a service entrance. While this aligned with earlier reports, the 30-year gap between the event and the testimony made verification difficult. The case gained renewed attention in 2009 when a true crime documentary series featured the disappearance. The broadcast generated hundreds of new tips, including one from a retired police officer who had worked in Fort Worth in the 1970s. He revealed that similar attempts to lure young women had been reported at other shopping centers in the area during that period, suggesting a possible pattern that hadn't been fully investigated at the time. In recent years, genetic genealogy has offered new hope for solving cold cases, though its application to the Fort Worth trio case has been limited by the lack of physical evidence. The families continue to advocate for the case, maintaining websites and social media pages dedicated to sharing information and generating new leads. The disappearance of Rachel Trlica, Lisa Wilson, and Julie Moseley remains one of Texas's most puzzling mysteries. Their case has influenced missing persons investigations, contributed to changes in how such cases are handled, and served as a sobering reminder of the vulnerabilities that exist even in seemingly safe situations. Today, the families still seek answers, while a new generation of investigators continues to review the evidence. The Seminary South Shopping Center, now known by a different name, stands as a silent witness to that December morning in 1974 when 3 girls went Christmas shopping and never returned home. Their story continues to resonate with people across the country, serving as both a tragic mystery and a catalyst for ongoing efforts to protect the vulnerable and solve long cold cases.